Bible, alternative change us roll about to vote for the baby who's actually our approach to fighting militarism must begin with tangible action. Theory, absent real solution is useless as action. Enforcing theory, draw 14, understanding must be linked into the multiple direction of the act constitution. Anything about what's your system, real solution with the power society, what's got quickly, critically, what's not necessary, the action forcing theory, need to plug that, make no one people. And gun culture replicates patriarchal nationalism and neoliberalism. Men take guns to protect their families from those marked as criminal. Government 14, owning guns, abuse nationalizing and control the influence that's from legal American justice, sort of, I'm going to use terror, brutal civilization, and they have something little self-destroyed, guiding government, but nothing more than suiting the power that individuals and humanity, as all rulers will know how the patriarchal national three, no good work. Seen the comments of David gun who would attack themselves, not like the Indians who were looking peaceful with the gun. There's one of the tapestry of the USA, the cross-houseling and odd settlers slash reinforced white supremacists who starts the formation of those who are defined as bad order, and the regulars who are those who last certain men to retain hits marks of the when different constructively to organize back. Gun rights fuel suspicion of the collective. They atomize anti-rules and amplify fear and prejudice to brander 14 fragmentation of society, advocacy, and individual renders survive progression. There's a no individual more change of the rights, the NRA, RCA, the collective input, and active policy of power, the argument, the prejudice, top radical suspicion of the life of the gun, 7 American fear, the cause of the chief of fear, the government's go without alone, government 15 goes against society, the life, society, moved on for radical individuals, and thus the plan the United States federal government coordinated. The 50 states also banned private ownership of handguns. Harvard to the coordinated network of the approach, but often coordinated activity against the federal decided not to recharge the federal regulation states would sever the non-ATF agents the state believes to begin to retard the standards federal government should regulate the well coordinated manner. And gun control is the only solution to our pathological militaristic culture predicate on a voluntary individualism. Draw 15 liberal band-aid reform to not work gun culture and normalize everything found to the witch can collect you. American those considered as well the U.S. government and the blood to the future of the remaining love of the abuse military distinction love the fair around the corporate institution bonds considered to be legitimate powerfully active politician the gun labor support money and the campaigns those for the interest control and the monitor show the antibiotic infection perfectly overwhelmingly has to be taken care of the culture fund going to be abstract of the business funds wonders how many has data to become clear the gun industry fueling national public the U.S. moved from the welfare state to the warfare state violence have been inevitable the gun violence high economic fund hedge fund manager investment companies that make revolve the most immediate actions gun control the handgun bans are key Americans use them as a quintessential weapon number one he sees the stand against culture advance Volkov 9 the courts acting to wide handgun ban unconstitutional inquiry and how law burdens right to bear arms of the American people have considered the handgun to self-defense woman the handgun are the most popular weapon choice for self-defense and mere possibility of concealed guns chill discourse on controversial issues like schools halting democracy Brander 15 democracy takes we're not scared of the great billion share the relation called leisure collaborative democratic beliefs and all the way women's love and necessary consider the impact on college campus the college campus was refugees laboratory controversial ideas the contact and going to the pot one college campus witness gunfight between the arguments the guns chase and speech and the one you see rubber the mindset of guns is necessary for self-defense people are no longer constantly reminded as guns means of solving problems Donahue 15 the government and opposed to buyback reduced gun possession murder rate fall to the close to one of them that took a great prime minister of the country speech culture of guns are no longer self-defense the less person but no longer reminded guns to be to a alleged grievances and the gun debate is about a question of culture it shapes our view of consequences Kahan 3 the dispute over the death penalty the dispute over the gun destroyed the same part of the gun debate what about the make the debate so entirely not discriminated about the fact alternative view what American often fear the belief about roots of the rival culture fear that we can reach and about consequences we can have a common go about what value gun laws are the threat control the map perfect on the culture theory of gun control the turns competing for some of the risk with the question of the individual cultural orientation for very strong to attitude toward guns other factors there than no pressure imperial out of the body the beast ordinary sense believe who can share the culture outlook to one who believes the consequences of gun control to be derivative of the world views and future narratives must be deconstructed predictions are not value neutral they're influenced by the military industrial complex car 10 the military future the conduct assemblies to protect like the Alchemist not the provide the U.S. multi-maker the tools and the smart military future the next between the military and corporate future and consider the new military future that different from predecessor the new perspective contemporary the military future was often pessimistic and prediction security the environment tax force new set expectations from self and the new military among U.S. national security the separate the consumer strategic shocks the tension with the generation out of the more the apocalypse, the social uncertainty, and the military future, the enemy, rotating, not saying actor, the media, regard the client, and hegemony, determining coordination to go to the central key part of the new military future, the future player, paint a very bleak future of the main military, hold secure the military tensions, be able to last the bashing, still the coach of the wars, the future more than archivation justified limit the military intervention, checking wars, the surveillance and the weapons procurement, the absence stance against propaganda, the vote out despite consequences, Dixon 99 to allow consideration of the political influence out of the paradigm, would the law to static observe consequences, divine abolishment, we were the first being a little bit how did the no real chance at that time, persuade caution the policy of the abolition movement did take care of the political reality of the restriction of this precise time applied to the should later discussing handgun control providing moral vision of the handgun policy that would best reduce violence and respect rights.
You read everything, right?
Yep.
So your argument is that there's a gun culture in America that makes people want to own guns and afraid of others and creates them as like militarized threats, correct?
It's not necessarily that makes them want to own guns, but creates a trope of an individual that people like want to fulfill.
Sure. So basically, people want to fulfill the ideal of a masculine male. They're afraid of other people, so they buy guns.
I mean, masculine male is like one of those tropes.
That's fine.
Yes.
So you also say that people view handguns as being key to self-defense.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, if you take away those handguns, why wouldn't that make people more afraid and act out more violently?
Sure. So there are a couple of different arguments. One is that the narrative of self-defense is exactly what helps perpetuate this culture. That's identified in nearly every single.
Sure. So what is just putting a legalistic solution of banning handguns? What does that do to undermine the narrative of self-defense?
Sure. A couple of different arguments. One is the Giroux evidence that seems to indicate that Band-Aid reforms are like not.
Yeah. My question is, how is the AF not the exact liberal Band-Aid reform that
I'm getting there next.
Okay, go for it.
So. The other like liberal like Band-Aid reforms such as background checks don't get to the root of the problem, which is people's access to guns and the idea that as long as their availability out there.
Wait, so is the root of the problem access to guns, or is it the
not necessarily access to guns, but that's a part of the NRA's strategy of lobbying, being like, we've given you background checks, like this is sufficient to fight back against the culture, which are sort of piecemeal reforms.
Let's talk about this Cahan, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, 3 evidence. It says that culture shapes our view of consequences. This card just asserts that the debate about guns is a values debate. Why does that mean that we don't care
not
about
necessarily.
consequences?
I would say that
so,
asserting it.
So do you have to win like consequential solvency in order to win?
I mean, it depends upon what you mean by that.
So
I don't think that like simply.
Do you have to win that the AF net decreases militarism in order to win?
I mean, yes, that is one of the impacts.
Okay, so
yes, there are other impacts that the AF could win that if we win.
Okay, so let's talk about this Cahan evidence. I guess what impacts are most relevant under your framing?
Things that break down militarism.
Okay. So this Cahan card, does this mean we don't care about the consequences of the plan?
No, not necessarily, but it says...
What's the implication of it then?
The Cahan evidence simply says that people on both sides of the gun debate tend to cherry pick evidence and base their values, or base their like empiricism based upon like cultural relativism, which means that based upon their cultural approach, that will like oftentimes be where the evidence concludes.
So how does that not also apply to the AF?
Because the AF is like a deeper criticism about gun culture. This is more talking about in terms of like empirical analysis.
So your argument is like people like cultural relevance.
I mean, a good example.
And people cherry pick values, but the AF is like the one thing that is actually objective.
Okay, you're like no, that's a mischaracterization of the evidence. A good example of this is like they did a study in Connecticut that created an alternative synthetic model to compare based upon like what like Rhode Island did versus like what Connecticut did on like the permit to purchase model, and said that based upon that though they cherry picked which countries to select and like which empirical data to evaluate because of like lobbyists.
Let's talk about
Giroux specifically, or the Cahan evidence specifically talks about how bans get to the root of the problem, and it's not an empirical one, but rather a symbolic and cultural shift.
Okay, another question. You say that predictions are influenced by the military-industrial complex. How does that not also apply to the AF?
Right, so the car evidence is specifically a securitization argument, talks about things like declining hegemony and economic insecurity, and identifies those as specifically what Carr is indicting, but it would also apply to like big picture impacts as well.
Wait, so talking about economic insecurity is a bad thing?
Not economic insecurity in the sense that like capitalism, but rather economic insecurity in the sense that like economic decline will lead to nuclear war.
Okay, another question. Is this Dixon evidence an independent reason to vote AF?
No.
So you say vote AF despite consequences because AF is a stance against property.
Right. If you read the evidence, it compares this to like the abolitionist movement and talks about how like the fact that like white people would backlash because you like gave black people rights doesn't mean that like you shouldn't like give black people rights. That just means that like white people are fucked up.
So what arguments does this justify like human rights being good?
I mean, yes, there's a justification about why the right of the AF is like.
Wait, what?
Or not the right of the AF.
It seems like
not the right of the AF, but rather like the fact that like people will backlash because you take away their guns. The 1AC evidence seems to indicate
it's just an answer to the backlash argument.
I mean, yes, that is one area it could be applied to.
Alright, I'll send.
Oh, done with prep?
Yeah.
Alright, 244?
Yeah. Sorry, how do I apply more?
What's the order? Just
2. Or 3 in this case.
3?
Yeah.
Cool.
Now you're standing.
Yeah, go for it. Did you send it?
So if you guys didn't hear, it's 3 and then case top down. when he sees the anti-black status quo, blackness is defined in terms of the ontological structure and antagonism of white civil society to be produced by any attempt to use existing legal structures or philosophies. Warren in 13, the ethical impulse to wrest the human from historical violence, which is found in doubly, tells for the human nothing more than this violence constitutes the human state through an ontological antagonism without the human, the world which ceases to exist in non-ontology, blackness secures the boundaries of the human, the blackness is excludes and enables ontology, conceals and dirty secret, the ontological ground which is situated is unethical, the real human something without the practice of blackness also being a world class exclusion. This black body cannot place within symbolics of identity, politics, sociology, law, and its ontological access. Blackness is fundamental to gratuitous violence and void of relational capacity. Oral 13, the structural vulnerability to appropriation should be understood as pragmatic. Black existence, black slavery, free lives in the command of the ways contrary to contingent violence in accordance with transmission of law. The violence against blacks is gratuitous without any justification, whether owning slaves again or mass incarceration. Black existence, stockpiles, all just within a spatial boundary of black existence, fundamental object, infinite value overviews for anyone who can clip subject to natal alienation means a slave never has a starting point in civil society. Gunther, 12 slaves were not allowed to inform the understanding sexuality, inherited meaning, the living present and conscious boundary slaves for strong tense and opposition structures systematically fought to foreclose themselves to never maintain a living meaning in order to render services. The master's slave was excluded as the master's world is non-coordinated alienation tax very possibility mutual support marked out and support the demand for legal relief is the perfection of slavery making the slave bound under the master farley. 05 the weaver for slavery not segregation to provide every form of white over black may come with posterity not for freedom. The movement is slavery perfecting itself and sorry for falling itself from slavery is the light holding the rule of law slave perfection itself and passed down before the master of its own people slave competency possible reconciliation of freedom one race for legal relief. The alternatives to embrace the demand of slavery which is the end of the world is key to rupturing civil society. Wilderson 02. This realization should be cause for a long narrative about a truly revolutionary movement. Black liberation from negative dialectic refusal to affirm complete disorder one must erase incoherence with politics or to take this country down. Stasis will fail because the working position of coherence of the half a position of a coherence coalitions operating within civil society for less revolutionary promises. Crown of black intention civil war reclaims blackness politically enabling the side of actual dereliction which renders civil society asunder. Now politics CGS reform will pass what Obama pushes uniquely. He Collins 113 Obama said hope we work together on bipartisan priorities. Let's see achieve reform. Ironically prospects of reform will be some of the biggest stages on the House side. There is also such a movement another basic factor. Brian has repeatedly said reform is priority politically. We have all the right degrees to build a passing the office political suicide for Democrats. Strong distinction between regulation and sure 15 politicians were handgun ban because position doesn't fit the frame of accepting responsible gun owners from regulating plenty of keep handguns and keep protecting politicians are loath to advocate government take their way political impossibility. Mark that impossibility. Criminal justice reform solves mass incarceration and over criminalization. It's the central human rights issue globally. Tops 15 the impact of mass incarceration communities particularly staggering criminal justice reform and central human civil and human rights issue in the century bipartisan peaceful legislation tackle many root cause impacts of over incarceration and criminalization. The act takes another step to end harsh penalties outweighs the act because even if citizen non-citizen handgun violence is a bad thing, the prison industrial complex is a comparatively larger and more powerful institution also doesn't link to your epistemology argument because I'm directly trying to destroy the military industrial complex, not reinforce it. Skip the next card. Also skip the next off. Let's go to case. Start at the top. Off the Giroux evidence, you say the military-industrial complex is bad. First, this is an epistemological takeout to the app because it means that, you are always already entrenched in this. Just passing a legalistic policy that puts a band-aid on the solution is exactly what Giroux criticizes, which means it's try to die for the alternative. Second, you do not solve the underlying narrative of cultural violence, which is the root cause of gun violence in the first place. Again, you just put a quick fix on the solution, which means the violence is inevitable in the world of the app. Now, the second Giroux card says that democracy is key. First, impacting democracy is inherently exclusionary, and colorblind notions of democracy will always not include black people. For example, the civil rights movement just created an era of color violence, which does nothing to change anything. Second, democracy and all of your arguments about human freedom and identity assume a subjective capacity that black people do not have an agency to engage in those types of politics in the first place. Now, Giroux says that we need tangible action. First, this begs the question of the ontology debate. Obviously, when those arguments prove that pragmatic change within the system is literally impossible. Second, it's comparatively more ideal to presume that the U.S. institute will just act ethically given its historically unethical institution. It's more of an abstraction to presume that the U.S. institute will actually do anything to help black people. Third turn, it's comparatively more tangible to do the alt because we will never actually be policymakers, but it's better to take individual ethical actions that can resist the system. Now, the Gorman 14 says that liberal individualism and subjectivity is a bad thing. This is not unique. Obviously, the alternative also rejects this. The Denver Banner card says that we Adam as individuals versus begs a question over whether multi-racial lobbies are effective in creating change in the first place. That Adam is still try or die for the alternative because those racial lobbies will always fail. The Giroux card under that says that putting a liberal band-aid on reforms is the bad thing. Obviously, the app is the exact liberal band-aid that I'm criticizing. Cross-apply the argument from the overview. The Vola card says that people view it as key to self-defense. It just proves that you will make the culture of fear and gun culture even worse because if you take away this thing that people think is key to self-defense, that just means that they will react even worse. Now, the Donahue of the evidence, this is talking about Australia. However, the U.S. obviously has a much larger and more militaristic gun culture. For Australia, this argument does not apply. The Cohen evidence says that it's a question of values. This is just an assertion we should obviously care about consequences because that is what frames the gun debate. In addition, the burden is on you. Just read specific author index. You cannot just say that all studies do not apply if I read different studies. Now, terms of the case, first turn, a handgun ban cause mass police incarceration of Martin Gorovich 15 gun control means writing more criminal laws, creating new crimes, therefore creating more criminals, more pretext for militarized police, full of racial, permanent, multiple police killing of honor, black men reminded us police operate with fairly constrained from sought to stop and face to mass incarceration, vulnerable police subject populations, to control market control, and handgun abuse lead to a substitution effect increases death global. 93 handgun wounds are usually survivable. Shocking blacks are much more likely to be fatal. This is less deadly weapons and numbers spread. Shocking especially large to increase the overall death toll. 30% of persons attempting homicide risk from handguns along a total homicide would increase 72% of handgun criminals said. It was to shot obstruction 72% substitution labor due to enormous multiplication of homicide. Also, the garbage card obviously links to your militarization arguments because those are just internally to black policing incarceration. If I prove that the AF massively increases that, then it turns under your framework. Also outweighs militarization because if black people are systematically excluded from society and destroys the possibility of resisting militarization in the first place. And handgun been strengthened organized crime to an illegal market, which now outweighs the case. Cobalt, never marking a home who made illegal handguns to provide a major revenue source. Organized crime strengthened. Organized crime, while the more solid handguns reported in the same volumes of marijuana, 20 million would enter the country annually. Also, if I win these empirical solvency turns to the AF, it just proves that you reinforce culture, gun culture even more. You read empirical solvency evidence, for example, that gun culture changed in Australia, but obviously if you are creating an illegal market, that just means that gun culture will increase in more insidious ways. And review of literature proves that the AF increases crime. Cates and elsewhere, 17,004. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences released evaluation 253 journal articles, 99 books, 43 government publication research failed to identify any gun control to reduce violence. And the same conclusion was research the U.S. Center for Disease Control outweighs the AF evidence. On specificity to the United States, U.S. gun control is uniquely key. I'm the only one with actual empirical solvency evidence that the AF increases crime. Also on the range of studies, because you only talk about Australia, however, talk about the hundreds, and the U.S. does not have funding or infrastructure to enforce gun bans in the first place. Banning states that might decide the gun removal position is not important, refuse to impose the ban. Many states lack the infrastructure to remove the gun ban. States have no system to inform the gun bans. Federal gun bans fail to achieve their goals. The federal bans are severely under-enforced, enabling barriers to continue possessing your guns. Also, all of your arguments about how you change a cultural shift and are a change in values are non-falsifiable. The only argument that you can actually falsify in terms of the AF framing is whether or not the consequences of a gun ban are bad in the first place.
Right. Ready?
Yeah.
Is the United States federal government good or bad?
Bad.
Then why? So let me get this straight. The United States federal government is bad.
Yeah.
But we should listen to the political system in order to pass criminal justice reform.
No, not at all.
Wait, your politics dissent says
I think that the
like,
politics dissent is probably empirical proof as how messed up our system is.
Wait, but like the politics
when the
dissent,
AF tries to do,
the politics dissent is like we
your
need
question?
something to pass in order for like some good to occur.
So here's the distinction. That is just a
Do
turn.
explain.
Oh, okay, so I think there are two things that interact with this. The first is that is just a turn. Presuming that your policy.
This isn't a turn. This is
That's
like we
not
need
all.
the United States criminal justice
I do
system
not defend
to function, or no, we need the U.S. Congress to function.
Varad, the key distinction is that I do not defend USFG action. I do not advocate the USFG doing anything. I say under your framework.
So let me get this straight.
Wait,
we should allow you.
No,
different question.
Okay.
So let me get this straight. We should let U.S. Congress function and do their thing for some normative good end. But the United States Congress is bad, and we should reject everything they do.
This is like conflating Deont and util. The key distinction here is that I do not actually believe that the mass incarceration matters under my framework. If you win,
so you're telling me
if you win that we care about policy impacts, then those things matter. If I win,
well, then how do you go for the K and the politics dissent? Tell me a world where you go for the K and the politics dissent. Because seemingly in the world of all where we destroy the world, U.S. Congress does not exist.
I think this is another conflation about how the K operates. My argument is not like in some fake post-fiat world.
I'm sorry. So let's talk about the link. The AF is a political suicide for Democrats. There's a strong distinction between regulation and bans. This is only because the only reason it's political suicide is because a bunch of old white men in the Republican Party are like, we want our guns. And your link evidence seems to indicate that we should listen to them in order to stop something worse.
So I think that this is...
I really think this is a contradiction,
No,
Nick.
this is not a contradiction. A different argument...
The politics dissent is not a contradiction with util. Not really, I just kind of want to make fun of you right now because the politics dissent clearly contradicts with the
we
K.
won't get anywhere.
Let's talk about the critique. Your argument is that...
I don't defend the state doing anything.
That's fine. Let's talk about the critique. The Warren 13 evidence seems to indicate that the end point of the one he sees the anti-black status quo.
Yes.
They all provide some sort of psychoanalytic justification for their methodology. Why is psychoanalysis true?
It's actually not reliant on Wilderson's psychoanalytic theory.
Then what? How do you justify afropessimism?
I didn't read those cards.
Then how do you justify
afropessimism? A couple
afropessimism?
distinct warrants in the cards. I can go through those if you want.
I mean, there's still a greater theory of yes, there's some sociological justification.
It's not like I didn't read any of the libidinal economy cards.
My question is then, what's the justification for afropessimism? Why is blackness ontological?
Yeah. So the first Warren argument is that just structurally the way that American society is created.
What does that mean? Like structurally,
when you cut me off in the first 4 words of that sentence, where
what is structurally?
It's gonna be hard for me to explain.
What does structurally mean? Like
the middle. Okay. Do you want me to keep going?
Sure.
Okay. At the site of the middle passage, black people were transformed from Africans who had cultural identity and different lived experiences, etc.
That is Wilderson's argument.
Yeah, Warren is summarizing that claim. It's not the libidinal economy argument. There are obviously different facets to it.
Then that's just an argument about social depth. That's not an argument about why blackness is ontological.
Really? Because I can read from you from the card where it says the violence that constitutes the human is sustained through an ontological antagonism. Without it, the human in the world would cease to exist.
That is the argument about how the libidinal economy structures the way the psyche works.
If you find one place in the card where it says libidinal economy, I will applaud you because I'm certain that it is not in there.
Okay.
And I'm also down for that debate. I'm just telling you, my cards do not see that.
Okay. Three minutes. Actually, 1 sec. Status of the alt.
What do you want?
I want you to spec what the status of the alt is.
I want you to tell me what you. I don't want you to
Don't
read.
give a
Like,
shit. Just tell me what the alt is.
Is uncondo cool?
Yes.
Okay, cool. People read like must read condo in the 1 a.m. and I just hate that.
Didn't like I just want to know what the status was. Attaching now. Sent. The order is going to be the case, the disad, and then the critique. Oh, sorry. I need a little bit more time.
You gonna flash it?
Yeah, I will. I'll flash you the new one.
I'm just gonna keep pre-flowing my stuff.
That's dope.
It's right above the match castle. With my dad. Free Amestoy.
All right. 222.
So what is it again?
It's same order. I just added some cards to the dots.
Then
Case, disad, critique.
got you.
Nick, what was the last card you read on Case, the author name?
It was the Bayan card.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Case DNK.
Yeah. Do you get it?
I didn't get it.
Yes.
Oh, one second. Go.
Did something in the doc change?
Yeah, I added more cards. Just tell me when you're good. Awesome. He's considered the impact of the militarism and strong tracks against brown bodies and the best response to go group 1 to see 1 and 2. The drone evidence says that the handgun would be able to solve background checks are not sufficient because there are ways of getting around it now. He says democracy is too, so this is talking about democracy in the traditional sense, or what it says that radical democracy is a form of process of political subjectivity that enables people to formulate their identities, which means that this is not the criticism of democracy. You said that begs the question on the ontology debate. If I won the critique doesn't matter, if I won the K that means this argument doesn't matter. You say that we're not going to be policymakers, but all the one key evidence says that when we break down militarism within the debate space and enables us to have advocate skills to create a real change, the real chance to start. You say that you say that causes backlash, but you consider the cultural relativism argument that says that all your argument based the Dixon argument that says that backlash doesn't matter because people backlash when you give slave rights in the first place. That doesn't mean you shouldn't give slave, which is considered the one easy argument. You say that causes substitution, no substitution. This is troll argument. Dixon 93 one has to doubt the reliability of the same proof the British white firearms carry the back and like boys a small percentage of murder committed longer the more probable that someone to turn left legal to be shown longer. While it's much more
difficult to secure the wooden log of calls out the handguns more convenient. Also, Kane solves lack restriction, makes trafficking easier. Also solve the illegal markets turn the Hawko 12 the lack regulation factors traditional west and exchange field power through the gun laws and which few restriction maker the prosecution of the transaction of the cartels more difficult than U.S. gun control key Malco 12 the 90% of the water user drug operation and the U.S. Mexico the destruction of the uncard the illegal regulation to the on-track mirrors field the U.S. gun control to continue use without a chef. You say the Gorvich argument, but this is not unique until you have an alternative generate uniqueness for this argument. It means that things like the drug industry also do this as well now. The disad won't pass far on 112 either with common ground attention to legal debate over the Brindle criminal convict out of the rent to the evidence house whoever they want to be able to criminal justice deal without change to U.S. criminal code negotiation break out of dispute also done false and profound conflict do both send to gun control thumbs. This is literally their link actually skip that card. Disad non-intrinsic logical policymaker could do both debate about ISIS coming out single 101 expect but debate over ISIS continue to do that since the right side Congress should vote along side out of the popular restricted democratic limited community the winners win and PC is a key actually if unique is true the link doesn't matter vice 111 Congress out of the multiple bills move a bill change spawn of the member the vote part of the mind McConnell bill the bill should move forward the will be just action out of the college lawmakers the most obvious obstacle election year the tax taxes glitch there the moment Brown criminals from the continue looking toward the Congress still legislative give it anti criminal justice more immediate record also now in the next on the critique of the resolution ask questions how we order the about should be yes no questions how we order the plan A fairness of African every prepared for intermountain interviews then come over the kids every now prequel negative round shift for the debate away from that fair causing time to use B go to this heuristic to not abstractions and only 14 resistance and to go to the power of the continued structure of the wind go to rational change power of the power of direction come to the power of the political space come to the heuristic and fire to the careful direction over to Washington demonization part of the false and ethical political activity below practice and the American detention when having decided to the ethical give the consolation temperature to power playing where the cards available marking card available also Wilderson and Pulitzer are goddamn a double turn saying that we should listen to the United States founding government also at the same time saying we should destroy the world. It's a contradiction because one orientation says that we should abide by what the United States Congress does because that leads to some normative good end but also why people shouldn't read Wilderson Evans 15 I wonder why there was no some of the cards for the racial argument in favor of radical black argument particularly focusing on white violence necessary for the black revolution the argument that reduced this talks to be the black white one reported Afro-pessimism focus on anti-blacks as opposed to the addition of white supremacy all white people are implicated no matter how good they are next to their community civil society non-finally and opportunity to experiment the white will always be second to the black and opportunity to experiment the white for practice Afro-pessimism non-affirmation blacks white Afro-pessimism makes no sense how white Afro-pessimism is just anti-blacks under no circumstances I decided the world will be spread of thoughts Afro-pessimism your engagement with the argument always be theoretical and don't objectify white blacks cannot exist also contradiction uniquely enable racist institutions and I make and critics like 95 one not discard the system itself is why the little room for maneuvering out of power relation down to the white contradiction supported element over the white to be contradiction white is able to maneuver the round to challenge the dynamic element of white is crucial the aspect of creation part of the street required government's reputation part of the ability to make the universe the source identity the difference contradiction essential and have logical resecurity the critique tactics better the white to make it more essential the map white is the practical white is the community the white though how the particularly involved recently does as ever also blackness is not ontological but rather contingent Hudson 13 the exclusion of temperate once far the police side of the over side of the exclusion and exclusion of the nowhere great ontological side of the political and never otherness and nowhere side of the ontological MC Wilderson social the narrative divide white black market hard that black also we are not the law of state affirmation Newman 10 Smith on states not meaning working where the state limits reaffirm legitimacy demands made from the outside political order includes the conduct with legitimacy let's say highlighting fundamental state practices
Can you mark it?
yeah I'll just send you the doc I marked it wrong so
okay I'll wait
I'm also just going to take out the cards I didn't read. Alright, send. Did you get it?
yeah
You had how much? 240 I believe.
you read this Wilderson and Howard card
Yeah.
okay
Oh no, not the Wilderson Howard card, my bad. That's one card I forgot.
you read that Hudson card there right
Yeah.
but you marked it at the break
Yeah. Where it's enter.
Cool, Evans.
Right? Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Do you self-identify as black?
No. Not sure why that's particularly relevant.
We read it that not black people can't talk about race, so if they're not black, then that counts.
No, actually, it's pretty specific to white people.
Okay.
But also, this argument's about afro-pessimism specifically.
Okay. So what are the ones?
Sure. So Evans gives a couple of different arguments. The thesis of afro-pessimism is that white people and whiteness is not redeemable. For one white person to purport the idea of black people, or like black people being socially dead and a fungible object, and therefore we should save them and advocate for them, or even the idea that you should be involved in the conversation is one that completely contradicts the thesis of the argument. But also that humanity and civil society are fundamentally premised upon the destruction of black life for white life. So inevitably you being like afro-pessimism is something that we should advocate for. It just means that you are part of the parcel of the continuation of the destruction of black life, and therefore are implicated in it. There are a couple of different arguments. Do you want to keep going?
No. All flesh.
Yeah. Randall, can you fill up my water bottle?
Just spray me.
Did you read about it?
The Navy's obviously wrote the rules.
Alright, it should be some.
For you.
So
What's this amount of years?
is everyone
Roles
ready?
between
Thanks, bro.
navies while rounding up some children.
For like the answer?
I have not received the cards.
Okay.
Now I have received the cards. Let me open it up. Alright.
Alright, did you guys get it?
Yes. Did you say what the order was?
Yeah, it's gonna be an overview, then the critique.
Adjust the K.
Yeah. I mean, I might give it half at the end. Probably not.
Okay.
Alright. Ready? The one-year large weakness is the point there's no hope for change within civil societies. All of its structures built on the backs of slaves only reproduce black that the impact acting within legal structures subject black people to endless suffering, violence, and slavery. That answers his argument about why I need to prove the plan. If the plan is a bad idea, my argument is that all of the linked or dissents of the plan because they further subject black people to anti-blackness. There's an opportunity cost to doing the alternative, which can rupture civil society. Now there are multiple conceded words for the ontology question. If I win, that any of these are true, it proves that the change for the material change of the plan is literally impossible. So you vote naked on try or die framing. First is structural antagonism of the foundations of civil society built on the backs of slaves. The descended middle passions Africans returning the slaves on human structure in opposition to humanist legal system that to promote freedom states are just ontologically excluded from civil society. That answers the internal warrant in Hudson because you say that the symbolic order is contingent. There is no warrant for why it's contingent. At the center of the middle patches, black people were removed from all identity, history, and culture. They are natally alienated, which means that a firmest feature of the structure of civil society is not contingent. Second, gratuitous violence against black peoples beyond justification, disease, utility, killing, torturing black slaves for pleasure, separating black families, letting disease affect black communities. All prove this argument. The after violence can be solved by using rational legal procedures, but if that violence is advanced and fundamentally irrational, that is both the terminal solvency deficit, the proves that they just read and trust anti-blackness. That means that the case solves literally nothing. Now I will line by line all your arguments. The first argument is that I have to prove that the plan is net worse. First of all, I do that. First of all, I do this because I prove all the links are distance to the plan. Now, the fairness question. First of all, the basic question of fairness for whom black people are already structurally excluded from the debate. There's no reason why this impact is relevant. It's also just a tactic to continually evade the discussion. We should be having exacted about methods to be not about fairness. Also, you said that it would limit discussion under the AV method. This makes the question of whether the AV method is good. If I win the Wilderson arguments, we should be talking about critique debate now. The AV method now does not. First, this makes the question of the ontology debate. It assumes that the state can be used for good purposes in the first place. If I say the state is inherently unethical, takes out the argument 2 week, not reading out the masters, helps the masters children if we try to infiltrate the state also lose riders can crush the movement more easily since it has more powerful resources. Also, this is repugnant and requires black debaters to roleplay their oppressors, meaning they cannot engage in debate in the first place. They have to defend a legacy of slavery that is a prerequisite to debate. Fourth, handing over problems that state just sees individual responsibility. There's nothing ever it should just assume the state will solve all the problems. They ever have a revolutionary movement in the first place. Now you say that it's a contradiction because I have the politics that this is humongous conflation. First of all, this is equivalent to conflating Dale and Utah and saying because you read it NC and read Utah terms that is a contradiction. However, it is not because I do not advocate USFG action. The key distinction here is that I do not say that the USFG should actually do something. I do not ever say that is normatively good. I only say that is normatively good under your policy making, your consequentialist framework where we already embrace the state. I agree that USFG action is a bad thing. I do not actually defend the state action with answers all your contradiction arguments, but even if you win this, you still can link comparatively harder because I do not defend USFG action. You directly advocated that. When you read a 1AC, you decided that the best 1AC to read was one that directly defended the state, so you link way harder. Now, Hudson. Okay. First, Hudson is miscut. He agrees blackness is ontological. Hudson, 13, liberal democracy doesn't recognize blackness. Means black substance engages the white master for black to be ontological. Reduced for white to feel at home. Colonial identification, work mentality. You maintain the status quo. The white colonial unconscious side of political struggle. Too. This is also miscut because Hudson is using Fanon's interpretation of blackness to justify Afro-pessimism in South Africa. That does not apply to American race relations. Wilderson's argument is that is uniquely distinct from this miscut. Again, Fanon first the basis of Wilderson's Afro-pessimism. Hudson's theory. They're in agreement that blackness is ontological in the first place. Also, the card has literally zero warrants. You conceded overview arguments for why blackness is ontological. If you do not understand why the symbolic order is contingent, you can definitely not vote on this argument. Now, Newman 10 says we make demands on the state. First of all, there's no reason why the 1AC is a demand on the state. It is literally just a federal action that will ban guns. It does not say that people are demanding for this gun rights movement. You feel it a federal action that will ban guns. It's not a demand on the state. It also incorporates state action. All of the links are to state action, so the links still apply. Second, this assumes that the structure of the state can still be used for something productive. You say demands on the state is good because the state can be used strategically. My argument, if I win the ontology claims, that the state can never ever be used strategically in the first place because it is fundamentally anti-black. Third of all things have never empirically changed because of demands on the state. For example, the civil rights movement was a demand by Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders on the state, but it just ended in an era of colorblindness, and there's still massive incarceration in the prison industrial complex, which means that demands on the state literally do nothing for black people. Now, the Evans 15 evidence that white people cannot talk about Afro-pessimism. First of all, this argument is obviously ridiculous. You also talk about different race arguments, and you tell black people what to do. Under Wilderson, there is almost no distinction between a white person and an Indian person because a white person and an Indian person because they're both contingent forms of violence. Wilderson's argument is that violence against black people is gratuitous. It is gratuitous and not contingent, which means that there's literally no distinction there. Second, this would mean that none of you judges who are ever white people could ever say anything productive about black people. That is obviously not good for movements against anti-blackness because even though white people should not lead the movements, they can still reinforce black authors' ideas. For example, I'm just taking Wilderson's pedagogy and saying that you should vote on that. I am not saying that you should vote for me because I'm white and white people should represent racism, but if you ever think that a white person should be able to talk about race or should be able to read a Wilderson argument in the debate, this argument is obviously ridiculous. Also, empirically disproven because, for example, Ben Crossan, who is a white guy, is the person who introduced these arguments into debate in the first place, which just proves why, although sometimes white people can be really messed up, they can sometimes have good ideas and introduce black people's ideas into debate. So if you care about black ideas into debate, then to some extent, white people's ideas are also relevant. This is not funny. This is a very reasonable argument. Yes, white people are bad. Does that mean they should always shut up and never do anything? No, that'll probably be worse. Also, this is the conflation of my arguments. My argument is not that it's not that white people are inherently or libidinally bad. It's just that the structure of the USFG is bad and founded on the death of black people, which means that even though the USFG structure is bad, then black people still do things. You read this argument that says that Wilderson evidence that libidinal economy means all doesn't solve anything. First of all, this is obviously conflation. I was pretty clear across this. I do not defend Wilderson's libidinal economy theory of psychoanalysis. You have not isolated a specific link to the critique. The gratuitous violent argument and the ontological structure of civil society predicate off the middle passage say talk nothing about the psychological libidinal economy of white people, so none of these links apply. But also, you've conceded the solvency for the alternative, that embracing the end of the world as the demand of the slave can solve 100% of the problems of the app. This is a conceded this is a conceded solvency argument because civil society is fundamentally predicated on the structure. Also means it resolves 100% of the case because all the violence you talk about against black people is a product of civil society. It's not a contradiction. I already answered that argument. But
Just the Evans card. Pull it up. All right, is everyone ready? Is everyone good? The entirety of the Tunar was an abstraction from racial identity, which Wilderson would say double turns the entirety of his arguments. His argument about how white allyship and who is speaking there about the arguments doesn't make any sense because Wilderson's argument about how the white political subjectivity inevitably relied upon the structure of the black body. If you think that Wilderson would be okay for white people to just be talking about the structure of the black body, then vote F, or vote neg, I don't want your damn ballot anyway, because Wilderson's argument specifically talks about how the fungibility of blackness is predicated upon white people being able to be the ally, being able to be the one to talk about these issues without ever being able to accountable for how their racial identity implicates the conversation. Just imagine how black political subjectivities form whenever the white people are the ones who are always introducing them to arguments according to the two and are always the ones reporting their sort of ideological analysis and ideological approach to how we should engage the basis of the race. Your argument is how you should talk, how I talk about race arguments as well, but the Evans argument is extremely specific to Afro-pessimism and how he talks about how white people have reduced the argument to simply being it sucks to be the black body. All the arguments about gratuitous violence, how he and his people, i.e. white people, are the ones to be perpetuating this violence is exactly the problem because the important move is that they simply continue the fungibility and use inevitably to trade off in order to win ballots, in order to further some causes on their own part. Inevitably, Nick's not going to do any goddamn thing about this after this round about ending the world, which is why all people are implicated no matter what. Your role as a white person means you can't abstract your racial identity. Your next argument is about how you should no good movements. You need white people in good movements, but the argument here is again that you need white allyship in order for black liberation. But all of your Wilderson arguments seem to fundamentally disprove this. Say that whenever white people are involved in the process, that seemingly co-opts all the movement, which also means that all of your arguments about white allyship inevitably are a double turn with your Wilderson critique that says that white allyship is exactly what is predicated upon the structure of the body. Now, all of this fundamentally impacts the critique and his prior question to the rest of the debate, because if I win that, the performative nature of the one he was anti-black means that that comes prior and means that even the telos and the method of the one he was flawed to begin with. Next, you say that people like Ben Crossan introduced the argument. Who gives a fuck who introduced the argument? The literature was out there in the first place. You were the one who read it in this debate, and I provided the reason about why that perpetuates fungibility. Also, just because Ben Crossan introduced it doesn't mean that makes white people redeemable. That's like white people giving a black guy $10 and being like, now you can go buy yourself something, and being like, that makes white people redeemable somehow. Just because you have given black people a gift does not mean that you are redeemable. Next, you say that there's not a liberal economy argument. All of your gratuitous violence arguments seem to be predicated on that white people will inevitably cause destruction to black people. I can't, like, all of your arguments about white people causing death to black people all assume this argument that you continue the fungibility. All white people are implicated no matter how nice they are. All of the arguments about how humanity insults, there's no such thing as white Afro-pessimists because you affirming blackness necessitates its destruction, which means the alternative is also a double turn with your performative nature. It's really easy. White people equal black death. That's the thesis of the critique. The Evans argument is very specific and very good to say this is a fundamental performative double turn and that your performance necessitates black death. All of your arguments are predicated upon blackness not being ontological or white people being redeemable, which is not true. Sure.
still sick.
Remember that part we said about Black Death?
I'm representing my thoughts on this. Right?
Just bullets just flying. Oh, wait, this is disgusting.
You know that whole being black thing?
It's pretty dope.
Sorry.
I mean, I saw
Oftentimes.
that's fairly, that's duly noted. No, I'm snitching.
If you do this whole argument about Black Death,
Hey, he blowing boogers and spreading disease all over the room. The death of boogerism.
Okay. No. I know.
That's even insinuating you would get kicked out.
have nice hair.
I did though. Very good. That's crazy.
You are, I think.
Shit.
level and that it comes first, so you need to be answering it way more in your NR, and I think that he impact turns all of your answers that respond to it under the K frameworks. I think that's pretty sufficient. He's talking pretty specifically about what happens when white people co-opt a movement. You just say that, like, oh, but white people can start the movement and it'll be better, and he's saying that that's like the problem, right? And so I just think that without some sort of like answer to the impact turn on it, I would feel comfortable not voting on this. So
I'll ask questions at the end.
okay.
You want me to go next? Sure.
Probably go because
What?
yours is probably gonna take a lot
Okay,
longer
go
than
ahead.
mine. So I voted similarly to Monica. I didn't get a lot of contextualization from the negative on this Evans debate, but I felt like the affirmative response to it that kind of provided a like meta turn to everything you were saying. That like the idea that white people can like start the movement and that they improve it just kind of links into this argument that Evans is making that like there can't be an inherently like white ally within the Afro-pessimist movement. So I wasn't really getting like anything from your answers that could address back that kind of meta argument.
I think that the 2NR says a lot of really persuasive and plausible things, that white people can be involved in anti-racism, that white people can be racist and have good ideas, that white people are not always bad, that they should not just always shut up and do nothing. The problem is that those are not consistent with the argument you read in the 1NC. I think you try to go for this no link argument. This is, I didn't make a libidinal economy argument. That's the only way you could link me to this. I think the 2AR could do better to point out specifically where this is in the 1NC. Varad, you say a lot about, well, this is your argument that, you know, white people are always making black people fungible. You should point out the card. Since it was a dispute about what the 1NC actually said, I went back to evidence. I think the RL13 evidence is bad for the negative on this. It makes multiple arguments about how black bodies are always used by other people. Presumably those are not just black people. Presumably those are white people. It also makes the argument that, and I didn't write down the line, but it talks about specific actions of white people. It talks about owning and trading of slaves, the ghetto and mass incarceration, black existence is always stockpiled. I think there's a good question about who that is by. So I don't think you have not said that white people aren't a part of civil society, which is always bad. So I think he does get a link to this. And I do think it has an impact. I think it links to your own K. And when you go back and look at the rhetoric of the 2NR, and this is something we talked about a couple months ago when I judged a very similar debate, is a lot of the rhetoric in answering this I don't think is really consistent. So like when you're saying things like, oh, white people can be messed up but have really good ideas, like that sounds a lot like your link argument on why, oh, the state can be, you the AF just think that the state's messed up, but sometimes can be good. That's the perfection of the state. That's perfection of legal recourse. And so I think, Varad, you should point that out on how a lot of the 2NR seems blatantly contradictory just in the way it's describing the link arguments, and then the answers to these positions are doing exactly what he says the AF is doing. The hardest part of the debate for me is deciding whether I think this link that's created in the 1AR and 2AR outweighs the links that the neg wins. So that the 2AR is really weak on. All you say is this is performative, which comes first. I don't know. I don't think that's enough. I think the neg has potentially performative links that you advocated the state, especially when comparing the link from the politics DA to the AF, saying you advocated the state. That's bad. But I just don't think the 2NR does enough to tell me that those are performative and pre-fiat, and my kind of gut sense is to go with the 2AR, that a performative argument about you in debate perfecting civil society is worse than the hypothetical AF plan doing that. But I could have agreed. I think if the 2NR had said my links outweigh because you explicitly advocated this whole system, which is really bad, my link might be minor, in response to the Evans evidence, I could vote neg on those links.
Okay. How would you guys answer this argument in the future?
The Evans argument?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I think I would talk about, like if I was reading Wilderson already.
Yeah, so that it's consistent. Or
So
do you think that's just impossible?
No, I think that you could talk about the difference between your specific material body and the things that you perform, right? You could be like, look, performing whiteness happens when you advocate for the United States federal government, and then also try and say that you're trying to be someone who like says that whiteness is bad, right? Like, so you can talk about those type of performances, and then say that there are ways that you can be white and still respond to whiteness, right? Don't have. He's just saying that claiming the title of white and then using that to further something is bad. If you're saying like, look, whiteness is a bad thing and performing whiteness is a bad thing, so I'm just gonna stand here and be like, look, this is a good thing, but I'm not gonna be the one to promote it, is different, right? So you can just talk about the difference between performance and performativity, I think, and that's what is essentially what you need to divide here. Because if you could do that, then you can be like, look, you're doing just as bad of things by advocating for the United States federal government. Does that kind of make sense?
I have three things. One is the link differential argument I just explained. You should say whiteness inevitable. We're in civil society. Like, duh, there's going to be some link to me, of course, but better than what the AF did. I know it's a little weird with this particular K, but I think it's a framing argument you can make. The second thing you can say is that you should say the judges should sequence how they think about this. They should say, should white people be involved in anti-racism? And if so, then what should our anti-racist strategies look like? And so that if that question of involvement is first, I think it's obvious that the answer is yes in some respect. And then the second question is, well, should we be like Afro-pessimists, or should we have some other type of strategy? And say it's more, let's decide that question first and then decide what strategies are and keep the two apart, because we need to know what the best strategy is. Maybe it's important to have a discussion or something. So maybe the way you separate this is that in debate it's important to have white people in discussion or have discussions, and then it's weird when the 2AR explicitly concedes all your Afro-pessimist stuff, but that's one way. The third thing I would say is just answer the Evans evidence straight up, answer the claims that like black people are objectified by people running Afro-pessimism and what that is. I thought, Varad, I think you might want to recut this card. I think you cut out some of the rhetoric that I thought was really good when I first read this blog post, which is when Rashad talks about black people being reduced to objects of study as part of the white gaze, and when you read Wilderson, you are just treating them, and you do say like, this is your, fungibility, but I think that's the core, that's a better warrant than just like you're, you don't add anything to the conversation, you're just being a white ally. I mean, I think that language is really strong and creates a very proactive link that just saying you don't add anything, that doesn't do as much for me.
So I guess, your second response was that like I should sequence it and decide whether white people should be in debate or should advocate these things in debate, and the obvious answer is yes. I guess my question is, how do I explain that and show how it doesn't contradict the like uniqueness claims that are made in the K, or is that even possible?
I mean, I think since that's, I think we have to start there, so I think it's easy. I think since that is obvious, I think we need to come up with warrants for what that would be. I think maybe saying, have some other arguments like white people inevitably in the conversation, so it's just a question of what scholarship that is, might as well be Afro-pessimism, given that you're going to concede it in the 2AR, but you don't know that. But say, if I win that Afro-pessimism is right, then it might as well be that's what white people are talking about, if they're going to talk about race at all. So once you've won that first claim that they should be like part of the debate, or I guess you have to have warrants based in your position to resolve the conflict. So why is it good for your alternative for white people to know about Afro-pessimism? Maybe it's good for them to stop endorsing things that are really bad according to your links. Maybe white people shouldn't endorse the USFG, and the alternative like teaches them to do it. Maybe it's not about like teaching black people about Afro-pessimism or helping them in debate. So maybe make fewer of those arguments and be like, this is about